So he's a Ghazi commander, and he's got all these folks on his side. And the reason that anyone follows anybody in Turkish tradition is because they are successful at what they do. And what is he successful at? Conquering stuff. Now, what does this mean for you as a Ghazi? Let's say you know how to shoot an arrow, you can swing a sword, you can do all this stuff. So why would you sign up? Well, the first thing, the imams have assured every Ghazi that if you go to fight for the faith, when you die, you go straight to heaven. That's pretty exciting. No matter what you've done, you go to heaven because you're a Ghazi. Two, when the Ghazi take over something, they take the land, they enslave the people, and they get a ton of money because they take everything. So not only can you go straight to heaven, but you're going to be really wealthy. So this is a great life choice if you want to advance the cause of the faith. So Osman is incredibly successful, as we have said. This means that he is attracting other Ghazi to follow in his stead, be under his command, because he's successful. That's the first thing we have to understand about Turks. Okay? Turks do not follow someone because they have a nice name. It's not like a European society where, well, they are descended from the king, so we must obey. No. In Turkish society, if you do not perform, people just leave. So if you're not pushing, you're not pouring, you're not winning, they just go away, and you find yourself in command of no one. So it was vital for a Turkish commander to succeed. So Osman has this band of Ghazi and eventually uses it to carve out an empire in Anatolia, which is modern-day Turkey. When he does so, the Western Europeans start referring to these people as Othman. It's a mispronunciation of Osman, or Ottoman. Hence why we have Ottoman Empire. The Turks themselves would call themselves Osmanlı, or the followers of Osman. So, we have the Ghazi, they're doing this thing. So Osman starts to set up an empire. Who was his son? Osman's son. He's going to be a guy who's also incredibly important. Let's see, randomly describe it. The ideas. Okay. This is the trickier part. It's not actually a word yet, though, but it's in there. Orhan is the dude's name. Orhan, and what he does is actually make an empire. Before he pretty much just have a collection of territories, Orhan conquers Adrianople, which basically sets up as an empire. Without cities, you have no empire. So this starts to change things. By setting up an empire, we are going to be needing some things, not just cities, but how are we going to administer this empire? How are we going to know how to rule it? Well, actually, the way they did it was traditional Persian kingdomship, statecraft. So it was based on a system, but nevertheless, the Turks kind of had their own in mind as well. And even the name Sultan is a Turkish one. Sultan, by the way, means military commander. Your book says something to the effect of he who rules, or that's not really true. What it comes down to is it's a military title. And again, it goes back to what they saw as the most important aspect of the rulers. They had to lead and they had to command. So the Sultan is the guy who rules the military. Now, originally, the military is going to be made up of guys on horseback and going to be commanded by the Turkish beys, which are their equivalent to princes. And these horse riders are going to use the bow and arrow to carve out an empire. Now, the bow and arrow that the Turks used is very different than what we see, say, in England with the Welsh longbow, or even in France, because they tend to be rather enormous chunks of wood used for throwing arrows. A Turkish bow was actually composite, made of several different materials, including wood, horn, and leather or silk, all glued together, and it was actually made in kind of a U shape. It's what we call a recurve bow. So that whenever you strung it, it was against the grain of the wood and against the grain of the bone, so that you had a nice snap to it. So you could actually have a more powerful bow and a more compact frame. Ideal for shooting off of horseback. Now, how many guys have ever ridden a horse before? How many guys have ever shot a bow before? How many guys have ever done it at the same time? That's where things get a little bit difficult. You see, these guys were good enough to fire an arrow from horseback backwards at a target 100 yards away and hit. And those bows were powerful enough to pierce metal armor just like that. So when you imagine you're going against medieval-style knights, they're just running circles around these guys filled with arrows like pincushions. But that's not what really allows the Ottomans to create an empire. That's going to fall under the reign of Bayezid. Bayezid Yildirim. One of the things you'll see about Turks is that they nickname their leaders. Sometimes good things, sometimes bad things. They weren't really worried about, if it hurt the feelings of the ruler. They kind of told it as it was. For instance, a not too flattering name. It's a dude named Selim II II. They nicknamed him the Yellow because he was an alcoholic and he had jaundice. He actually ended up falling down a bunch of stairs. That's how he died. He fell down the stairs and broke his neck. Not exactly the most honorable death. On the other hand, Bayezid's nickname was Yildirim, which means a lightning bolt. Now, one of the things he did that was kind of unique, that had not been done before, was he expanded the empire in two directions. Not only was he fighting the Christians and expanding into Europe, he was also fighting south, expanding against Muslims. However, the problem is you can't use Ghazi against Muslims, because they're Muslims. It's not expanding the faith, it's just butchery. So what he did is whenever he took over a Christian area, he did not ask for gold or jewels or pretty robes or anything like that. He asked for children, specifically boys. What was this child tax called? This guy's fun. It's one of your words. Who knows? This does not bode well if you guys aren't reading. Somebody who has not answered yet. Yes, ma'am. Yes, what was the term for the child tax that was being utilized? It's one of those funny Turkish words I had you guys read. So now might be a good time for me to say, if you guys are planning on just looking up the answers, that's not going to work really so much. You gotta read them and know them. These are all supposed to come down quiz tomorrow, so I'm not going to do some reading. The term is Devshirme. The Devshirme child tax. You see, what he did is he requested children that he then utilized as his own personal army. This new troop had its own name. You guys know what that is? The name for this new army that he puts into place, using the Devshirme. They were the... Yeah, go ahead. Janissaries, yeah. It comes from the Turkish word Janishiri, which is new troop. That's what it means. But what he did is he had Christian soldiers who were later converted to Islam that acted as his own personal army, and he would use them to fight the Muslims. They had no problem fighting against the Muslims. And so he was nicknamed the Lightning Bolt because he would be fighting war down the south and stop from up north, fight here and here and here like a giant ping pong ball. And this allowed him to expand the empire rapidly. The problem, though, is he ended up really irritating the other Turkish beys who was conquering, and they sent out words bad about him, saying he's attacking Muslims and this and that. And another conqueror heard about this and took exception to that. Does anyone know his name? The guy who's going to come back and actually end up defeating Bayezid at the Battle of Ankara. he's actually one of the most feared conquerors in Central Asian history. Yes?
Mehmet the second.
It's not Mehmet II. We'll be back to him. He is one of the most important conquerors, but not that guy. Yes? Not Mehmet I. He actually doesn't really do too much for our intents and purposes. Yep. It's not Suleiman. He's not actually one of the Ottomans at all. He comes and destroys the Ottomans temporarily. His name is Timur. Amir Timur, specifically. Amir means commander. Timur is often known by the less than flattering moniker Timur the Lame, or in the West, Tamerlane. Timurlane, as it would be in his hometown of Shaka Subs. Timur was a Turk Mongoloid personage from Chakra Subs who was a feared military commander. This is a painting of him right here after he successfully captured Bayezid. And the reason he's known as Timur the Lame is because when he was a young lad, he fell off his horse and broke his leg. And that leg never fully healed, so he always walked with a limp. Well, the thing with Timurlane is he had heard all these stories growing up about the great conqueror in Central Asian history, Genghis Khan, as we would call him. His actual name was Temujin, or Genghis Khan if you're using his title. But he was the guy who sped up this massive empire, and he was a really great military commander. He was also a brilliant tactician and state builder, because after he conquered a place, instead of simply just destroying things, what he did is he folded everyone into the tribes of the Mongol peoples, so that it became effectively Mongol. This meant that he was able to actually unify people to create this big empire. Tamerlane, not so much. Tamerlane believed the best way of controlling people was to make them fear you. So whenever he conquered a city, first thing he had his soldiers do was go and decapitate 2 people at random and bring the heads back to him so his slaves could erect a giant pyramid of skulls. Nice guy, right? He's a little crazy. And this would remind everyone, as they saw it, who was in charge. Well, of course, if you find yourself in the control of a crazy person, the first thing you want to do is stop that from happening. So, as soon as his armies left, they tended to rebel, and he had to go back and conquer them again. And then he had to do something even worse to make them swear and remember him. So he would do what's called building a wailing pillar, which basically was to build a wall of live people using rock and mortar and everything, and they would slowly die agonizing death. Again, nice guy. Well, this is the guy who ends up attacking the Ottomans and successfully defeats them. And Bayezid is captured and basically never heard from again. To this day, we don't really know what happened to him. That being said, there are theories that he was captured, led in prison, there he died. Some more colorful historians have said that Tamerlane kept him in a cage like a parrot, would throw scraps of food at him for his amusement. It also seems likely, though, that he might have actually treated him pretty decently. For one thing, he was a leader, and secondly, he was a Muslim. And one thing that Tamerlane loved just about more than anything was to play chess. He actually loved chess so much he named his son after 2 chess pieces, Shahrukh. Shah being king, Rook being rook. And so it's possible that he actually was sitting playing chess with him, because he would have known how to. This is something everybody learned how to do. So this is something that was kind of a big change. Okay? Now, what happens after Bayezid? Well, we're going to have another period of slow expansion until we capture the Golden City. What city is it beyond any other that the Turks really, really, really want? They attacked it something like 6 times. What's the city that they want? Let's cast a bomb. Don't know. The struggle. The idea. Let's see. Sumter. Anybody? Yes, ma'am. It's Constantinople. Last name? Good job. So Constantinople, and the conqueror, Mehmet II. Mehmet is an interesting guy because he was on the throne, and the commanders and members of his court didn't like him, so they actually replaced him with his elder and retired father, I believe it was, until he died. And when Mehmet took the throne again, he knew he had to do something in order to secure power. Because once he did, he ended up getting rid of all these advisors. And the way he does it is by capturing Constantinople. Now, the thing you have to understand about Istanbul is when it was first built, it was a small village on a rocky outcrop. It was named Byzantium. But after a while, it attracted the attention of Constantine the Great, who ended up building this massive city with enormous stone walls. So it was probably the most heavily defended city in all of Europe. So this is what we're trying to break. This is the nut we're trying to crack. And what's interesting is over the years, the Byzantine Empire has been shrinking. By the point that we're talking about, the middle part, early part really, I guess, of the 15th century, basically the Byzantine Empire is Constantinople. It's just one little city surrounded by Turks. They've never been able to take it before. There's going to take a new form of technology. What is the technology that the Janissaries are renowned for being the first to use? What is it that they do that has not been done before? What are they using? What piece of military hardware? Again, giving it to you guys first. Miss Fowler, Miss Cassavon, Miss Rose, and Miss Sumter. Either you can figure it out. Yes, ma'am. Yes, what is the technology that Janissaries are renowned for using that they're really the first to ever use? It was gunpowder, yes. That's it. Yeah, gunpowder. They were the first to use cannons that were effective. Now, the thing you have to understand about being a member of the Janissaries is that you are being asked to utilize a piece of technology which can explode. Okay? Now, here's the thing is, early medieval cannons had this nasty habit of exploding and killing everyone around them from time to time. So this was not exactly what you want to do. However, that being said, oh my God, it's a cannon exploding. Here's the thing is, the Ottomans were building better cannons. They were building what were called falconets. See, named small falcons. And what they were using to build them, and the skills they were using to build them, involved a good understanding of geometry and algebra. So they were using this, metallurgy, all these different things to mass steel, building these wonderful cannons. Actually, the truth, they were using brass. You had these wonderful cannons. In Europe, the reason you had inferior cannons is actually kind of an interesting one. You see, what other type of craft involves making something giant out of metal that one end is rounded and the other end is just an open area? What's the only other thing in Europe that's like that? Can you think about it? Yeah. What's that? No, not guns. Not guns. Much bigger. Much bigger. The only thing in Europe that has a rounded end on one side, big open at the bottom. Yeah. Not cannon. No. What'd you say? Not cannon. Church bells. Think about it. It's more or less a giant cannon shape, isn't it? Just not as long. Do you know what happened to the church bells mold once you built them? Once you poured all the metal and you had your church bell, what did you do to the mold? You destroyed it. So that no church bell would ever have the exact same sound as that one again. So what the early cannon makers were doing is they would build a mold, build a cannon, and then destroy it. Which meant that you had one cannon which would be very good, another that had flaws in it and it would explode. The Turks figured out which cannons were best and just made them over and over and over and over and over again. So they didn't have the same flaws. They were more accurate, more powerful, all these things. Using the cannons, they were able to just hammer at the walls. And it took a long time. It was something like 7 weeks or something like that. They were just firing cannons at this thing. And they had this enormous cannon that was nicknamed Big Bertha. That was something like that big a cannonball. I mean, it was just enormous. And eventually they put a crack in the walls. Once that was done, we give up. The last Byzantine emperor, Romanus Diogenes, is led away in chains, and we've got the emperor. We've got the empire we've always wanted. Renamed Constantinople Istanbul, and it remains the seat of our power, this glorious city. After that, more cities are added. Selim I adds the holy cities, including Mecca, Medina, and all the holy cities of Jerusalem. And so, really, the Ottomans become the defenders of the faith. At that point, they are the guys who are pushing it. Now, here's the issue. In Turkish society, whenever you have a sultan who is in command and he dies, all of his sons get an equal share of the empire. Okay? It's broken up. So in order for it to stay together as a kingdom, what usually happens is now the brothers go to kill each other, and whoever manages to win all the wars is now the sultan of everything. So basically every so often, every generation, you would have a grand civil war. Well, this was terrible. Thousands died. There was plague, there was death, there was famine. This is a terrible way of running the whole thing. Enter Selim I. He comes up with a new way of ensuring only one king grants the succession. Here's what he does. He has something like 16 sons. He gets them all and reviews them. Figures out what their strengths are. He takes the one that is the smartest, the best at statecraft, the strongest, all this stuff, and makes him his heir. And then he murders the rest. His nickname was Selim the Grim, as in the Grim Reaper. He was a guy who was very straightforward, very cut and dry. This is how it's going to be. No smiles ever. Not a very nice guy. But it did make sense from a certain point of view. Only 15 had to die as opposed to thousands. Why is the son of a fisherman less important than the son of a sultan? They're not. So in a kind of crazy way, it almost makes sense. The son he chose, by the way, was Suleiman. Now, in the West, he has the nickname Suleiman the Magnificent. Can you tell me what the nickname the Turks gave him? The Turkish is economy, but do you know what it is and what that translates to? Mispeller or misstriper? The nickname. Suleiman Plus. Let's give him a chance. Nope, not gonna try. Kanuni the law. Because he gave us the law. I mean, that's what he did. See, one of the things we've talked about over and over again is death and conquest and carnage and all that stuff. He does something radical. Peace. What? He consolidates what he's got. He builds the economy, builds the infrastructure, starts changing things so that we have an empire that we can be proud of. As a cultural renaissance, a flourishing of art and artists. This is the height of the Ottoman Empire. That's why he's nicknamed the Magnificent. In addition, we have to understand codifying law. What we're saying here is that the law is going to be explained. So in essence, we know what the crime is and what the punishment is. Spells it out. If you steal, this happens. If this happens, this happens, etc., etc. And what's really interesting about this set of laws, you might think, well, it's just going to be based off Islamic laws, Sharia, but it's not. For instance, in it is the concept of you cannot imprison somebody without first charging them with a crime. Habeas corpus, before it's been done anywhere else. They had the millet system. Does anyone know what millet means? M-I-L-L-E-T. Well, other things I can bring. It's a system of self-rule. So whenever we conquer somewhere, we don't put one of our guys in charge, but we don't necessarily kill their king or anything. It's like, okay, you're still king of these people, you just are part of our empire now. This is great! You're part of a better empire, and you just have to pay some taxes. I mean, this is a wonderful system and creates loyalty. It has a freedom. This is a meritocracy. A meritocracy, by the way, is a system where you get the job because you are the best suited for it. They don't care what your position in authority is. Take this, for instance. A slave, a guy by the name of, I can't think of his first name, Chindarla. I think it's Abdullah Chindarla. Rises to the highest seat in the Ottoman government besides Sultan, Grand Vizier, and he is a slave. This is not the slavery of the American South we think of. This is the slavery of the Middle East, where anyone, regardless of your position, can raise yourself up to a position of authority. So this is why, on the Ottoman lands, whenever the devshirme collectors would come around and say, hey, we want your children, people didn't hide their kids. They said, you forgot my son, don't leave yet. Because as a member of the Janissaries, your child wouldn't be just a farmer. They would have the chance to be educated. They would learn how to do a proper job. They could raise up into statecraft. They could become a politician. They would learn mathematics. They would learn all these different skills that they would never have a chance to being in the village somewhere. So the Janissaries was a way that you could become something. If you had a son, you were a Janissary, they could not be a Janissary. They were a free person. So this was something people were trying to get people to be Janissaries. It just didn't work that way. So this is the system we're talking about. This is the empire that the Ottomans were. They represented, in many ways, the most significant, powerful empire, not only in Asia, but in Europe at the time. Now, after Suleiman, things start to fall apart. Remember Selim II, the guy I mentioned, the yellow? The guy who fell down the stairs and died? Yeah, that's Suleiman's son. That's the guy who takes over after that. And we basically have a succession of corruption, things that go bad. So the empire starts to collapse over the next 500 years. You see, contemporary historians would say, oh, it's at this point the empire starts collapsing. But think about this. Take the age of the United States, double it, and that's how long it's collapsing. Yes?
So the guy, the Grand Vizier guy, is the one that fell down the steps?
No. Selim II.
Oh.
That was Selim I. So, Ottoman military success, as I said, at first relied on Turkish base using bows and arrows. Eventually, we had the slave soldiers, the Janissary, or Janissary, being Turkish, and created through the devshirme child tax. We also established that they were the first army to really use gunpowder. Now, that's not to be said that in China they did not. They certainly did, but we really call that more black powder. It was more used for like rockets and explosives, that sort of thing. They did actually have what we consider the first guns used by the Chinese, but they really weren't what we would think of as a gun. They were what you call a hand cannon. Basically, it's a little cannon on a stick, and you poke it with a hot match and you go. The idea of having a trigger and you can fire it, that's going to be the Turks who come up with that. Although that being said, it's fairly early muskets by comparison, and falconets. But nevertheless, the Janissaries are going to be a feared military group, and they're going to base a lot of their organization into modern militaries. For instance, when you join the Janissaries, you would be tested rigorously, deciding where your skills lie, and you would be given a specialty, whether it be something like folding turbans, which is actually much harder than it seems, or something along the lines of commanding armies. This was all important for military command, which, by the way, in our current military, after soldier training, basic training, you go into advanced individual training, or AIT, which is where you learn your specialization. So we kind of do the same thing. It worked. It was effective, and really they're going to remain a force to be reckoned with for the next 300 years. Towards the end of it, they start basically floundering because they're not advancing technologically. And as we'll see in Europe, the Industrial Revolution sets in, and that just opens a gap they can't ever close. Here's some pictures. That's what the Janissaries looked like. Again, these very colorful things. And what was kind of interesting is you kind of see here, they've got their muskets in one hand, and they've got these curved swords. Do you know why they did a curved sword? The reason has to do with fighting on horseback. If you have a straight blade, and you chop at someone when you're on a horse and you're riding, boom, what's going to happen is the blade gets stuck, and now it's a lever, and it rips the sword out of your hands. A curved blade, on the other hand, is like a giant slicing blade like you have on a salami slicer for lunch meats. It kind of moves up and out, and it pulls it along, and basically acts to pry the sword out of anybody who just slammed. So the Turkish sword is actually going to be emulated by every modern army, everything from Napoleon to the United States. I'll actually be bringing in, when we get to the Napoleonic Wars, Napoleonic era sword that looks very similar to that. This was the Defşirme, a portrait showing the children as they were presented and converted to Islam, and basically initiated into the ranks. And it was done at a fairly young age, so you would grow up with a new family, essentially. Sort of like the Jedi Order. You're not allowed to think about your old family. That was really nerdy, I'm sorry. These are the weapons used, the muskets I mentioned. As I said, they're quite pretty, actually. It's a very distinct design. But one thing you'll notice here is that it is a flintlock ignition system, which was very advanced for the time. The flintlock is really a 15th, 16th century invention. So, this is kind of significant. And then here we have the cannons, the falconets. This guy right here is a pasha. He's a governor, and his job is basically to administer a territory, but often this meant involving military commanding as well. And then these are the walls I was mentioning of Constantinople. This is what needs to be breached. Look at the layers of stone. Each of these walls is something like 16 feet thick of nothing but stone. Imagine trying to batter that down. It's not really going to happen. It takes weeks of firing to finally bring down one small portion. And then that was enough to end Constantinople. This is what it looks like from above. And again, its position along the sea is going to be incredibly important because this is a major trade route along the Silk Road. Every single bit of trade that comes across the Silk Road ends at either Constantinople or higher through what eventually will be Moscow. So this is something that is not only a moral victory, it's going to be a financial one. And that's going to push this Ottoman era of prosperity. Any questions? Please. All right. Let's look at what you need to have for the quiz tomorrow. Just in case you guys haven't looked. And I know that there's been some confusion about what do you mean there's words on homeworknow.com. Well, let's take a look here. So on Monday, so we're taking notes, and the words we had were the Council, Trent, the Anabaptist, and the Act of Supremacy. We had the video we watched on Tuesday. We kind of finished up some stuff on Wednesday. And then Thursday, we begin. What's today? Words you had to know for today. Ghazi, Defşirme, Janissaries, Mehmet II, Amir Timur, and Suleiman Kanuni. I guess that's all they. So, for tomorrow, you've got the blog, which is this sheet right over here. That is the excerpt from Justin McCarthy's The Ottoman Turks. And then, and for that, what you need to do is read it and tell me what you can tell about Ottoman thinking in 5 sentences. And then for the quiz tomorrow, you should pick 5 of these terms and learn them very well, because tomorrow on the quiz you can tell me identification, so tell me what it is, and then explain the significance. So, for instance, an easy one there, Mehmet II. Who was he? Well, he was the Ottoman Sultan, who was nicknamed the Conqueror because he conquered Constantinople. The real significance of that is that this is a major trade route and established them as a major empire. So there you go. Did one for you. So, identify, explain, learn from point to each, folks. Any questions? Please. All right, that is everything then. I am going to shut this down and start the compiling. Yeah.
Where do you go to listen to when you record them?
Okay, let me shut this down here and I'll show you.